Hello, and welcome to Precon Decon, the video series where I deconstruct the pre-constructed decks of Magic the Gathering's history. In this video, we're going to start looking at the Shadowmoor block, and we're going to start off with the first set in that block, which is also called Shadowmoor, which is, yeah, it's always confusing. But yeah, we're going to start looking at Army of Entropy, which is the black and red deck. So, let's look at the deck list. 21 creatures, 6 instants, 5 enchantments, 4 sorceries, 24 land, mana curve off to the side there. Let's start looking at these cards. So, now I get to talk about Shadowmoor. Let's start with the big gimmick of Shadowmoor, which is hybrid mana. So I would say at least half the cards in the whole block are hybrid mana cards, which is, you can see all these symbols on the top of these cards. If you're very new to the game, hybrid mana basically means you can spend, let's look at this one. So Shadowmoor Liege has a casting cost of 1, and then 3 black-red hybrid mana. So that means you can pay the black-red hybrid mana cost in any combination of black or red. So you could cast this for 3 black or 3 red, or 2 black and a red, like any kind of combination like that. But when it's in play, it counts as both being a black and a red permanent. So hybrid mana is this kind of way of having a multicolored card, but not necessarily having to pay multiple colors to cast it. The offside being is that kind of like hybrid cards sort of feel like they could be cards in either color, whereas multicolored cards usually have their own identity. It's part of my very complicated feelings and opinions and thoughts on Shadowmoor and hybrid mana in general. I think it's overdone a little bit in this set, but it's fine. Because after this block, it's a Lara block, which is a multicolored set. So this is kind of like laying the groundwork for multicolor, I suppose. Anyway, that's enough talking about like Shadowmoor's themes. Let's talk about the actual deck. So the strategy of this deck is -1/-1 counters, and basically giving your opponent a bad time. Because Shadowmoor uses a lot of cards that give out -1/-1 counters, either as part of effects or as part of keyword abilities, or they have mechanics that give -1/-1 counters as part of this keyword called persist, which we'll get into it as we'll see. I'm going to start talking about the cards. I'm rambling a lot, a lot more than usual. So one of the rares in the deck is Shadowmoor Liege. So 1 and 3 hybrid black-red. For a 4/1. Other black creatures you control get +1/+1. Other red creatures you control get +1/+1. And whenever Shadowmoor Liege becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, that player loses 4 life. So a lot going on here. So there is a Liege in basically every 2-color combination. I think they're pretty great. Because it's basically giving +2/+2 to most of the cards in this deck. These were like really strong, like casual rares. Back when we were playing this set. And like his secondary ability to make an opponent lose 4 life whenever they target him is also pretty good, because like this, a card like this has like a pretty big target on its head, because it's buffing up your board like so much. So someone wants to deal with this, but then they have to lose 4 life. Being 4/1 makes him like maybe a tiny bit fragile, but I think the benefit is so good, just to give I say most of the creatures in the deck +2/+2 for only 4 mana, while being fairly fairly decently sized itself. So yeah, good rare to have. I think pretty much every Shadowmoor deck has one of these lieges as a rare, I think. Then we have 3 Shadowmoor Gougers. So 3 hybrid mana for a 4/4. It can't block. So like a really a really aggressive play with this is to get this turn 3 and then turn 4 Shadowmoor Liege, and then you've got a 6/6 attacking on turn 4, which is it's very, very possible. Very aggressive block Shadowmoor, just because of how things are costing. There's so many buffs and stuff flying around. So yeah, really some really aggressive games. But yeah, pretty good. It's part of, again, I'd say it's part of a cycle. There's so many cycles in Shadowmoor, and Eventide. So pretty much every color combination has like this 3 mana like a power uncommon. Like it's really good for its cost. And Shadowmoor Gouger is the black red one. We have two Ember Strike duos, one and I'm just going to say hybrid mana for a 1/1. Whenever you play a black spell, it gets +1/+1 to end turn. When you play a red spell, it gets first strike to end turn. So yeah, I think this is a fine, small, aggressive creature. I say if you play most of the spells in this deck, which are black and red, it's getting +1/+1 in first strike. So it doesn't require much investment for it to become like fairly decent on the attack. And it's only 2 mana to drop it. So yeah, I think this is okay. And then two Cool Wrath Knight. This guy's great. I feel like this should be a rare actually because the effect is really strong. So 5 mana for a 3/3 flying and Wither. So Wither being this keyword in Shadowmoor and Eventide. So Wither is it deals damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters. So if this blocks or is blocked, whatever it's fighting is going to get 3 -1/-1 counters, which is really mean. Just really slowly like grind even big creatures down with -1/-1 counters. And creatures your opponents control with counters on them can't attack or block. Doesn't have to be -1/-1 counters. It can be +1/+1 counters. It can be charge counters. It can be like literally any kind of counter stops them attacking or blocking. It's a really strong effect. And considering this is following on from like Lorwyn and Morningtide, which had like this quite strong theme of using +1/+1 counters. Cool Wrath Knight is really strong. It's a really good uncommon, I think. And definitely fits well with what the deck's doing. We have two Murderous Red Caps, so 2 and 2 hybrid mana for a 2/2. When it comes into play, it deals damage equal to its power to target creature or player, and has Persist, which is so if it dies and it didn't have a -1/-1 counter on it, it comes back to life with a -1/-1 counter on it. So you essentially do it twice, which means you get this ability twice. So it comes in first time, does 2 damage to something, dies, comes back, does 1 damage to something. So yeah, I think it's pretty good. Just the fact it's a guaranteed. Persist I think is okay. It does better when it comes back in. It gets kind of like refined a little bit in the Innistrad block when it becomes Undying, which is a bit stronger because then the stuff comes back with a +1/+1 counter rather than a -1/-1 counter. But then it means like these cards can be cost a little different anyway. But yeah, Murderous Red Cap is pretty good, I think. Unfortunately, Ashenmoor Cohort is not great. So 5 and a black for a 4/3 has +1/+1 as long as you control another black creature. That is very expensive and just not very good. So at most this is a 5/4 for 6 mana, with no other abilities or anything like that. So yeah, just very expensive, not great. Yeah. This is a card you want to take out of the deck as soon as possible, I think, and just that has no other keywords or anything. It's just very boring. 3 Cinderbones, 2 and a black for a 1/1 with Wither and Regenerate. So this makes him so imagine Drudge Skeletons. So it's a little more expensive than Drudge Skeletons in both regeneration cost and casting cost. But Wither makes it like an even better chump blocker, I think, that you can block with it and regen, and you're also like permanently weakening whatever it blocked as well with its Wither ability. So yeah, pretty good, I think. Cinderbones. I say maybe a little on the expensive side, but I say for that combination of abilities, I think it's okay. We have 2 Blistering Dyflin. I don't know. That's the thing with Shadowmoor and Lorwyn and stuff. A lot of weird like Celtic words in here for like weird like sprites and imps from like Celtic mythology, which is So if I'm pronouncing that wrong, please correct me in the comments. But 3 and a red for a 0/1 flyer, and 1 black or red hybrid mana. It gets +1/+0 on turn, just so it's a fire breathing ability. This I feel is a little expensive. But I can see its advantages. So, so 4 mana and not 1 flyer, which is not great, obviously. But the fire breathing ability being either color is okay, I guess, because normally cards like this, it's only the red mana that gives the ability. So which means those cards then usually suffer a little bit in 2-color decks. But in this, at least you can use mana of either black or red to give the effect. I think it's still very expensive because unless you put a lot of mana into it, it's just a 0/1 flyer for 4 mana, which is honestly pretty horrible. I'm not going to do my usual fire breathing rant about increasing the cost for an ability that I've sort of started doing it by extension anyway. But anyway, it's I'm not a fan. Let's put it that way. Two Mud Brawler Cohort. So there's one and a red for a 1/1 with haste, and it gets +1/+1 as long as you control another red creature. So it's either an expensive Raging Goblin, which is okay, but okay. But if you've got another red creature down, it's a 2/2 with haste, which is it's fine. It's just not very exciting. And two Rattleblaze Scarecrow. So Shadowmoor gives us Scarecrows as a creature type, which is great. Actually, technically, I think there is a Scarecrow in a really old set. I can't remember, maybe like Alliances or something. But this is where Scarecrows really get to shine, and they actually get a legendary creature like the Reaper King, who's like a legendary Scarecrow, and he's like all 5 colors, and it's great. It's great. But Rattleblaze is so 6 mana for a 5/3. It has Persist as long as you control a black creature, and it has Haste as long as you control a red creature. So 6 mana again is kind of pricey. But I don't know, it coming down 10/6 and like it's got haste, and if it dies, it's going to come back. I guess it's okay. I guess okay. So the other area of the deck is Din of the Fire Herd, which is 5 and 3 hybrid mana. It's a hugely expensive card. But it does a lot. So first you put a 5/5 black and red elemental creature token into play. Then target opponent sacrifices a creature for every black creature you control, then sacrifices a land for every red creature you control. So at the very, very least, for 8 mana, this makes a 5/5. Your opponent sacrifices a creature, and they sacrifice a land. Which is maybe not too impressive as a turn 8 play. But assuming you've got, I don't know, say even one other creature out here, like one other like multicolored creature, this can potentially be very, very swingy as a card. So yeah, and just make sure opponents sacrifice a bunch of creatures and a bunch of land. Yeah. So very big, fun, splashy rare, I think, and it could almost definitely swing a game for you. I say at the very least, it makes a 5/5 and makes your opponent sacrifice a creature and a land at the very least. And I think it obviously just goes up from there. Then we have 2 Fists of the Demigod. So 1 and a hybrid for an aura that goes on a creature. As long as the enchanted creature is black, it gets +1/+1 and has Wither. As long as the enchanted creature is red, it gets +1/+1 and has First Strike. This is also another really great play on the Ashenmoor Gouger. It becomes a 6/6 with First Strike and Wither, which is so hard to deal with. I can say that from experience, having having played with it and faced against it. There's not really much you can do if that's happening on turn 4. There's a whole cycle of these enchantments because Shadowmoor Eventide has these whole cycle of hybrid colored gods, all with different. They went through the thesaurus for god, I think, and just picked a bunch of different names. All these auras that care. That give different keywords depending on what color the creature it's on is. This one is pretty. They're all pretty good. This is, I think, one of the better ones because First Strike and Wither is like a really mean combination. Because nothing can really block that and do well out of it. Because you need to survive the -1/-1 counters and then still be alive to then do enough damage back to back to the enchanted creature. 3 scars, just 1 black and 1 red. Not 1 black and 1 red, it's a hybrid mana. Just put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. Yeah, I think this is perfectly fine 1-cost card. Kills X1s and has utility because it permanently weakens. Whatever it doesn't kill, it permanently weakens, which is, I think, really strong. And really happy there's 3 of these in here. And then 2 Torrent of Souls, so 4 and a hybrid. Return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to play if black was spent to play Torrent of Souls. Creatures target player controls get +2/+0 and gain haste on turn if red was spent to cast Torrent of Souls. Do both if black and red was spent. So again, unsurprisingly, this is a whole cycle of these cards where you can technically play them just for 1 color, but it obviously benefits if you play it as if it's a quote real multicolor spell. Reanimating a creature and giving your whole wall +2/+0 and haste for 5 mana, I think is pretty good. Obviously, then you get to attack with whatever you've reanimated straight away, and also you boosting up all your other stuff. Yeah, I think this is a pretty good card. Honestly, I quite enjoy it. And then a whopping 3 blowfly infestations. So 2 and a black for an enchantment. Whenever a creature is put into a graveyard and play, if it had a -1/-1 counter on it, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. So this can start off like a really insane chain reaction in this deck. Because it triggers once for each of these blowfly infestations. So if you kill like one creature with a -1/-1 counter, and you got more than one of these out, that's then multiple -1/-1 counters that you're then distributing, and then they could die, and then so this can start off like like generally insane chain reactions. And having 3 of them is, I think, really good in this deck. Makes it like really strong. And again, yeah, it's just, I say, spreading out -1/-1 counters permanently weakens even big stuff. Yeah, really good to have 3 of these in the deck, I think. 2 puncture bolts, so 1 cast and a red, does 1 damage to target creature, and then you put a -1/-1 counter on it. So it can technically kill things with 2 toughness, because it does 1 damage, and then you get the -1/-1 counter. So that's basically essentially 2 damage. And yeah, I mean, it goes back to the thing. Even if it doesn't kill it, it's permanently weakening it. So yeah, I think this is a fine card to have. A single smash to smithereens, strictly better shatter, which is not difficult to do. 1 in a red, instant, destroy an artifact, smash to smithereens, does 3 damage to that artifact's controller. Bit of a weird card to include, because there's not too many artifacts really in Shadowmoor. I guess you got like the scarecrows. So this is essentially like destroy a scarecrow. There's not like really a lot of equipment as such. It's because it's not an artifact themed block at all. But just having one of these as utility is fine, and like it is. It's a pretty good effect. 2 mana to destroy an artifact and bolt a player is pretty strong. And then a single wild swing, 3 in a red for a sorcery. You choose 3 target non-enchantment permanents, and then one of them gets destroyed at random. So this is obviously potentially very swingy. Yeah, I think it's fine. I think a safe thing to do with this is you could just choose just 3 land, and then it's guaranteed land destruction spell, or just 3 creatures. I don't know. It's okay. It's nice. It doesn't have it doesn't have this kind of reddish drawback of like you have to choose like 2 your opponent controls and 1 you control, which is like I could very easily see that being a discussion when this card was pitched, like, oh, we should give it like a really red-esque drawback. I'm really glad it's just you get to choose any 3, doesn't have to be yours. Yeah, I think it's like a fun card, but obviously you can't rely on it. Yeah, we're done. So what could have been? So in general, I do think the card selection in this deck is pretty good. But as always, I always think there's some changes that could be made. There's a few duff cards in here. I'm not so keen on like the Shadowmoor cohort or the Dyflin. So so Cultbrand Cinder I think will be okay. So it's 5 mana for 3/3 when it comes to play. You put a -1/-1 counter on a creature, and it's like a black and red creature, so it goes well with the Liege and the Fist of the Demigod, all that kind of stuff. Incremental Blight is a sorcery that oh my god, it does so much. So it's like it puts a -1/-1 counter on 1 creature, 2 -1/-1 counters on a second creature, and then 3 -1/-1 counters on a third creature. So with the blowfly infestation, this thing could just like absolutely, you could just go off and just like just -1/-1 counters everywhere. Sickle Ripper could be okay. Not only does it have like what like just such a great name for a card, but it's just 2/1 with Wither for 2. So again, like very aggressively costed, very hard to like trade with. And Corrosive Mentor is 3 mana for a 1/3. Gives all your black creatures Wither, which is again like really strong, because actually a lot of the creatures in the deck don't have Wither themselves. I think it's really only the Cool Wrath Knight and like Cinderbones that have it. So giving essentially almost your whole board Wither is, I think, really strong. Lockjaw Snapper I thought could be a potential as well. Sticks to theme. So 4 colors for a 2/2. It's a scarecrow with Wither. When it dies, put a -1/-1 counter on each creature with a -1/-1 counter on it. So it's kind of like proliferate, really, if you think about it, but only limited to -1/-1 counters. So yeah, again, it's kind of a bit like blowfly infestation. Just plays into the theme of like -1/-1 counters everywhere. And I thought an alternate rare, So Ashenmoor Liege is great. Ashenmoor Liege should definitely stay in. Din of the Fireherd is okay, but it is very expensive. I thought maybe Everlasting Torment could be okay. So it's an enchantment. Players can't gain life, damage can't be prevented, and all damage is dealt as though it has Wither. So it's just, this is an absolute like watch the world burn card, you know? Like you just put this down and just like, that's it. I have no regard even for my own chances. Like everyone's going to have a miserable time with this. But it's super on theme, I think, for what the deck wants to do, which is, I say, just a bunch of -1/-1 counters and just cause absolute misery, grind everything down. Yeah. So in summary, I like this. I like this deck. Just I think it's really interesting focusing on the -1/-1 counters. Just really interesting selection of cards. A few duff selections, but overall I think the strategy is really solid. It's really nice having sort of like more than 2 copies of like some really good cards in there. Mostly the Blowfly Infestation, honestly, if I'm honest. But yeah, I think this one is pretty solid. A really good start to looking at Shadowmoor, which is I say it's a set which I have some conflicted feelings about. Mostly when we get to Eventide, actually. But I say we'll cover that when we actually get to Eventide. For now, we'll talk about Shadowmoor. So yeah, I thought this was pretty good. What are your thoughts on the deck after seeing it? Did you have this deck? Do you have any stories or thoughts or opinions on the deck after seeing it? Stick a comment below. Always like reading those. But I'll be back next time and I'll look at another Shadowmoor pre-constructed deck. Until then, thank you for watching and listening. Have a great day.